And another week and another $1 million did it a Forkman and Champ podcast. I'm Forkman. With me, as always, is
the Champ.
And this week we have a special guest on the show. Welcome, Bryan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
AKA Odie.
I went by that moniker a couple of years ago.
For any old fans. Oh, Bryan's listening into the podcast. Oh, it's been a big week this week, guys. I reckon.
Yeah, how so?
That with the all the changes going around now. Like we can have 5 friends here. Over. Is it the same with you?
I think
Bryan?
Gladys has lifted some of the restrictions. From what I understand, I think by this Friday, restaurants, cafes, etc., you can get back in there in some form. So we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Awesome. Same here, but except we can't go to cafes or restaurants yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think here it's 5 people in a house, 10 people outside you can have. But
General Andrews is sort of taking things a little bit slower than New South Wales by the sounds of things.
Yeah. He's taken it the toughest route, I think, than more so than a lot of the other premiers. But I mean, we had that big outbreak last week, so we'll see how it goes, I guess.
So how's lockdown been treating you?
Actually, surprisingly well, because I have pretty good internet here. I don't know if it's coming across through this meeting or not, but I have the NBN. I've probably got one of the fastest speeds that you can get, and I can dial into work. And I've got a little setup going here where I've got all the monitors, and I can actually do my work almost as if I'm right there. Every now and then there's a tiny bit of lag, but it's very, very rare. But other than that, I can, we do Teams meetings with pretty much the entire team there at WS every morning. It's actually quite all right, and I can go about my normal business quite easily.
Awesome.
Are you going to struggle having to start going back in when this is all over, when you know you can do it from home?
Yeah, see, that's going to be the interesting thing, isn't it? Having the discussion with the higher ups to see if this could almost become a more permanent thing, because you're saving the cash on petrol on the trip in and the wear and tear on the car.
And then less people in the office too.
So not to go into too much detail about it, but basically our office has said, let's try and keep as many people away from the announcers, because without the announcers on there, and if we basically just stick to music, things sort of go a little bit off skew. So the less people we can keep away from the announcers as to avoid affecting them, I think the better off we're going to be. So the idea was, hey, look, if you can, just stay at home and do all the work you can do from home. If I do have to go in sometime this week just to fill out a bit of, this is boring talk here, but APRA paperwork, which actually requires a physical signature because I've got nothing to scan it here, then I'll go in.
Awesome. Embrace or Champ, how have they been treating you? Because I know you've been...
I just started getting my JobKeeper money in, and I've moved back in with my folks at the start of this because I didn't really know how I would go, having been stood down and everything. So I'm actually better off now than I was before the shutdown. So I'm kind of spending all that money getting my car fixed up, getting a few dents taken out, getting the electrics looked at. So that's what I've been doing the last week, driving around getting quotes. And yeah, it's pretty expensive, but I mean, I'm not spending the money otherwise. So that's what I've really been up to.
Yeah, no, the lockdown hadn't been treating me good. I miss my son too much.
Mm.
Now, Brian, for those who have never heard of you before,
Yes.
I've been a massive fan of you for years.
Rightio.
How did you get into radio?
How did I get in? It's almost very cliche of this, but obviously I've just been a fan of the medium for basically as long as I remember. My first memory was actually sitting in the car with my grandfather, and we were listening to AM together, and he was explaining everything to me. That's, you know, when they do the beeps to the hour, and he would explain that to me, and for some reason that stuck with me, got me really fascinated. But I actually didn't get into radio until way later, because a lot of people that are in the business, they get in really, really young, and you know, they do their lap arounds, you know, in their early you know, like 18, 19 and 20s, whereas I didn't really get there until 24, 25. I was working for a what do you call it, a phone company, and I was driving around Sydney every single day, going around fixing phones. And one of the things that happens when you get to drive around all the time is you just get to listen to the radio. And I just always was sitting there thinking about it, and I just went, you know what, I'm just going to go do it. And I spoke to Afters, which is the Australian Film, Television, Radio School, and they basically said, we don't want anything to do with you because you've got zero experience, in a nicer way, obviously.
Yeah.
But they did give me one quick bit of advice. They just said, find out who your local community radio station is and go have a chat with them and just get on the air. See if you enjoy it. If you do, then come back and talk to us. So I did that and started doing community radio for about 3 months. And because I was so impatient, Afters had already signed up their full-time course. So at the time, they have like a diploma in commercial radio. And I said, I really want to get in. And they said, well, you're too late. The course is now taken up. So you can wait until next year and we'd be happy to take you. Or you can do all their short courses. And because I was too impatient, I just wanted to do the short courses then and there. So I signed up for pretty much every single short course that they had and completed them all. This is the short story version, basically. And after that, I won a competition to go to Triple M's brand new building in, where is it? God, I was there for so long. Goulburn Street in the city. So they just moved from Bondi Junction, this is Triple M Sydney, to Goulburn Street in the city. They literally had just moved maybe 2 days prior to that, and Triple M was hosting a housewarming sort of type party. I won tickets to that, and I was on the rooftop, and I spotted Mike Fitzpatrick, Fitzy, and
Yeah.
I just said to myself, now's the time. It's got to be now or never. And I just went up and I introduced myself, told him what I was doing, and he said, just give me 1 sec. He took off, came back, gave me his business card, and said, give us a call tomorrow. And I did. And basically, it's sort of snowballed from there. He eventually got me in to, learn some panel stuff. I'll say I worked, but I basically went in there for about 3, 4, 5 months, as often as I could. I wasn't being paid anything because I just wanted to be in the door. And then one day, they basically just said, hey, we need you to do something, but we can't get you in here as basically not on the proper cards because it was out of hours. We're going to have to hire you. And I went, get in.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was, it's not many. Like, there's a few more that's happening, from what
Yeah.
I sort of notice now, that not many leave afters to go straight into a commercial station of one of the metro areas. A few more's happening nowadays. But at the time, not many were. I remember when I was at Afters, the head of radio there at the time was a bloke called Steve Ahern. He said, "Hey, I've got a job. It's in Darwin or something. Do you want to go?" And for reasons at the time, I couldn't do that. But basically that was, and then he just sort of went to all the other students next in line, and, you know, he was finding jobs for them all over the, you know, country and in the country markets or in the regional markets.
So, wanting to talk about movies now. So, like, if anyone could play any of you guys in a movie of your life, who would you want to play you?
I'd probably say anybody who could. I've got quite a pronounced forehead. Is probably my defining feature. So I'd probably say somebody like maybe David Hyde Pierce, who plays Frasier. He plays Niles in Frasier.
Yep.
And or Neil Patrick Harris. I think, you know, pretty much anybody, if they were to make a live action version of Megamind, anybody who could play that character, you could probably get to play me, I think.
I'm just going to go with the obvious. Well, it's not the obvious, but something that was constantly told to me by people. But Ben Stiller was the one that I got told.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to go off what other people.
What about you, Forkman?
I was going to say, I'd want it to be someone who, like, knows a bit about the role of radio for that bit. So I know that it's going to sound strange, but I thought of this, like, long and hard a while ago. I was talking to someone. I'm like, "Oh, have you ever heard of Bryan Madigan?" I would want him to play me.
I've done a little bit of acting, so I'd be up for the challenge, Forkman. No worries.
I learned something the other day. Not to tell my partner he looks fat. She asked me how she looked in something, and I'm like, your butt's looking a little bit bigger than the last time I saw you. She didn't like it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
A few quarantine kilos, it'll come off.
Two. So I got asked how many party pies I wanted.
And you only said 2.
I had a big launcher. I had KFC.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So I put it out during the week that I was gonna have Bryan on the show, and if anyone had any questions, and I had a question from a guy called Ben.
Shoot.
Ben Miller. His name was. He wanted to know whether now with lockdown, a show that you used to do, a podcast you guys used to do, whether it would be a good time to bring that back.
Well, Ben, I'll drop an exclusive here. Garfield and I are actually working on something as we speak. Now, it's only Garfield and I. It won't be going under the same name that everyone remembers, but there will be something coming pretty soon.
Exclusive. You heard that here first.
We've done a couple of test runs to make sure that we can do this thing remotely. It's just getting Garfield out of his house and me over to there. Like our schedules they don't sync up well enough.
Of course, Garfield can't do Mondays.
Garfield can't do Mondays. So we're trialing the best audio service to use between the two of us. He's having issues with his computer at the moment, which we're trying to figure out. But there will be a visual aspect to it as well.
Awesome. So, yeah, no, I've seen a lot of podcasts have been, or a lot of people have been going down that road, audio and visual.
Yeah, we've been speaking about it for quite a while. We thought that the podcast market is quite flooded, so we need to sort of try and stand out as much as we can for all the other platforms. As you're probably well aware, YouTube is probably one of the biggest platforms going around, and it's very visual. So we're going to try and create something that's aesthetically pleasing for that, as well as pretty much everywhere else.
Champy, do you have any questions for Bryan?
No, not off the top of my head. No, Forkman. Just to be clear, Garfield is the name of your co-host. It's not the cat.
That's will be the co-host, not the cat. No, he was part of the original podcast, which I think Forkman was alluding to there. The After the Forking Show podcast from 2009.
2008?
2008, 2009. Look, Garfield and I actually both travelled down to Hobart earlier this year, which now seems a lifetime ago, to actually go and hang out with the original OG Spoonie. We didn't bring up this podcast or anything like that. Like, he's got his own thing down there at the moment. He's loving living in Hobart. I think he's networked currently due to COVID, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, I know he was, but I think that was during April. Now,
Yeah.
That's now gone.
No, that's a shame.
Yeah,
So,
it be good while it's lasted being networked.
Yeah, it was good while it lasted, and it's just a different time for him, professionally, like his own show, doing his own podcast or anything like that. It's probably not, I'm not speaking on his behalf. I'm just assuming here that he's not wanting to sort of go back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're just, Garfield and I are sort of, we're still obviously really great mates. We still hang out together when we can. And with the a couple of test runs that we did, we had a lot of fun and said, all right, let's do it. Let's see how it goes.
Awesome. Actually, talking about Spoonie, you two did get a shout out on the show a few weeks ago.
Oh, we must have missed that.
Yeah, nah. So when he was doing national,
yeah,
he would asked about you guys in an email, and he was like, I catch up with them quite regularly.
Yeah. It was really nice to head down to Hobart to hang out with him, actually. It was, it's a funny little town down there. It was almost quarantine-esque compared to Sydney or Melbourne, if you know what I mean. Like, Garfield and I went out for a night on the drink, and everything seemed to close really, really early, which, much to Garfield's chagrin.
Yeah. Now, I was trying to remember, did you like Pink, or you weren't a massive Pink fan back in the day?
No. She collectively got on all of our nerves during our tenure there, and my opinion really has not changed that much.
I can say I used to like her. I put my hand up there, but
my opinion was forced to be changed when I was working for a hit radio station, because you've got to show that you love your current artists and all that sort of stuff, which it's a shady past that I don't want to go back down.
And now you do the like classic stuff, do you?
Yeah, yeah. But surprisingly, now that I think about it, we do actually play a bit of Pink, and that's fine. I got no issues with that.
Turn the volume down.
I can separate the art from the artist.
And
Ah.
you were involved recently in a big launch of a radio show down in Melbourne a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I affectionately refer to it as being part of the pilot season of the Christian O'Connell Brekkie show. So for those who don't know, Christian O'Connell is now doing the breakfast show in Melbourne on Gold 104.3. But he came over from England. He had a huge show over there. It was networked across many cities in England. Number one pretty much everywhere. He was just killing it. And then one day they've decided let's bring him over to Melbourne. It was really interesting because I didn't know about Christian. I never really looked into the UK radio market that much. I didn't know anything about the UK radio market. I thought I knew everything about the Australian radio market. And I knew a little bit about what was going on in the US. So they brought him over. I started listening to a couple of his podcasts, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. I can see why he's so popular. It made sense to me when I was listening to his style of show. And he basically wanted me to sort of be the in-studio safety net for him. So my background was all about panel and all that sort of stuff. So Christian likes to work his own panel, but he was just a little bit nervous because, everything was a little bit different from what he was, used to. So I sort of I hung over his, I was like a shadow in the background just to make sure he felt okay. And then basically he didn't want me to leave the studio after that because, I guess he was a little bit, what do you call it? Superstitious or something like that. He just liked having me there, hovering around in the background as a safety net for him. And then one of my main goals, just to sort of go back to radio, was to always come back and live again and work in Sydney. I loved working for Christian's show. I would have given anything. I wish I could have brought the show to Sydney with me, but WS in Sydney has a great show with Jonesy and Amanda. So, I traded off one for the other. I said, all right, Christian, you stay there. I get to come back and live in my hometown again. As if, he was going to have a say in that anyway. It was great. It was such a fun. I really enjoyed the 6 or 7 months that I had in that first pilot season, as I call it. As I sat there and watched and said to myself, this show will be number one in Melbourne, 100%. And it was a year or so later, and he did it. Hats off to the guy. Not many people have done that.
No, not many people. I kind of celebrated. I had a celebrating drink when I heard he went to number one.
Yeah, we sort of everyone, with the company was just so stoked because having a bloke with a really thick, English accent like he does, come over and jump on, one of the biggest markets that there is in Australia, in one of the most competitive markets, like the Melbourne brekkie market is so competitive. There were so many years there where the differences between first and third was like, a couple of points of a share. So it was ultra competitive, and for him to come in and then he's kind of dominating now, and I'm going to predict that the numbers they'll just keep climbing.
Was it kind of difficult to get him up to speed with all the kind of cultural differences? Did you have like slideshows prepared, or did he kind of come over doing his research and everything?
No slideshows prepared. Basically, the company was really, really good. The man behind the scenes of all that was Duncan Campbell. He got him really, really ready and prepared. So, big congrats to Duncan for that. But, one of the main things for Melbourne was obviously, and you guys can attest to this, is be ingrained into that football culture that you have down there. And in that pilot season, we got pretty much every single club to come in and, woo him as such. And he jumped straight into it, and he became a D's fan, I think it was. No.
Yeah, D's.
Yeah, it was a D's fan.
Yeah.
And he loves the weather because it's half English weather and then it's half Australian weather, the majority of the time. So, his girls, also his two daughters have now, settled in quite well by all accounts. So it didn't take long for him. The biggest concern was, everyone, I sat back and I looked at all the radio, web pages and blog posts and all that sort of stuff. They're all sitting there going on about his accent. It was all about the accent, and that never made sense to me. It doesn't matter about his accent. It matters about what the content is that he was bringing to the, to the airways. And he brought a great show.
Yeah, no, when I saw those reports about his accent over, like, there are people over in Canada that are from Australia that go over there, and they have Aussie accents.
Yeah. Well, it's almost it is interestingly though a two-way street, because Ugly Phil O'Neill, when he went over to England for his first stint and came back, he used to tell us that they said he didn't sound English enough. And Phil has a slight English accent. It's not as heavy as Christian O'Connell's, but he has a slight English accent. And they said to him that he sounded too Aussie, but he was killing it over there as well. So it just goes to show this obsession that people have with what somebody's accent sounds like. To me, it's also the same with Jason PJ. I love that show. That show makes me laugh so much.
Yeah, I was going to say Jason PJ, they started like 6 months before Christian got
with
there.
Christian, it was all, visa issues and all that sort of stuff. For some reason, it just caused the company so much headache just to be able to get him to get the proper work visa between, England and Australia. It was hard for him to get it done, but they persisted.
He didn't have
and
to
they
take
eventually
time off after the first season to go and pick fruit, did he?
What was that?
He didn't have to go and take a break off after the first season to go and pick fruit in the country or something, did he?
Luckily not. He actually, from what I understand, he was one of the first people, I could be getting this wrong, but from memory, he was one of the first people to get a very special type of visa that was sort of just introduced or something like that by, at the time, Malcolm Turnbull. It was a very specific type of work visa that was just introduced, and I think Christian was the first name on that visa.
Wow.
Yeah.
History, first, one of the first.
I wish I could remember the name of the visa, but it was,
Yeah.
something like of special talent, something along those lines.
Oh. Is there anything in life that you want to achieve that you haven't yet?
That's funny. Back in the day, I would love to get on David Letterman, and then that's obviously, no longer the case. A part of me wanted to get on the Howard Stern show, but that show, I long for its older, I connect more with its older shows than I do with its more newer shows. I think the goal now, I would love to do one day, would be get on the Joe Rogan podcast.
I reckon we should start a hashtag.
Well, I got to, apparently he gets millions of pitches every single day, and I've got nothing to pitch at the moment. So once I have something to pitch, maybe then I'll start pitching, and then I'll let you guys know to jump on the bandwagon with the hashtag.
So I remembered like when back in 2018, when my partner was expecting my son. I remember one day I was listening to the radio in the afternoon, having a bit of a crap day, and I turned on the radio, and Brian happened to be doing an on-air shift on this particular day. So I called up, and Brian picked up, and I was telling him about the baby, and then he gave me some advice about strollers. So you want to get a lightweight one
Yep.
instead of getting one of those heavy ones, because the heavy ones, you're going to be spending a lot of time in the car park trying to put them down, take them apart, put them back in.
Yep. You take that advice?
Yes, I did.
Don't tell me you went for the heavier one.
No.
Yeah, I basically, anyone who ever says that, that they're expecting, that's the first thing I tell them, just the nightmares that I remember trying to pull down this thing that ended up weighing what felt like 50 kilos folded.
So, also back to 2018, there was a day that I actually got to meet Brian at with an oval.
Was this for Christian as well?
Yeah, they were with Kristen, the grand final.
Oh, the grand final. Yeah.
That big one.
Oh, geez, the grand final. That was a that you wouldn't believe the amount of hassle that we got about getting somebody to skydive into that oval. They just would not allow it, and I think they ended up skydiving the following year.
Yeah, they did last year.
Oh, so they must have broken them down, which is good.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't allow us on the oval as well, with all the grands to kick through the normal goalposts. They said you can only be standing on the edges, and you can only have X amount of people doing the measuring, because they had it in their head that the grands were going to get onto the oval and start tearing up all the turf, and we couldn't quite explain it to them that these were little old ladies who were just going to kick a football maybe 3 times and then walk off, and that was it. They were so convinced that all these little grannies were gonna start shredding up their immaculate oval. It was we were sitting there pulling our hair out. I mean, if you were there, Forky, you remember, like, everyone was lined up around the edges.
Yeah.
To see where where the reserves sit and all that sort of stuff. And clearly,
Grannies had to kick bananas if they wanted a shot on goal, huh?
If they wanted to, they'd have to. That was a fun day, actually.
Yeah, that was. And I remember making it. They had signs, and at the time, Brian had a beard.
Yeah, I was bearded back then.
So right, nice beard.
No beards now. They've got to go because of the Rona.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was growing one because I've been inside, but I decided, nah, I had to get rid of it to be prepared.
Go, unfortunately.
Now, thank you for joining us today, Brian, on the podcast. This is our 6th episode.
It's my pleasure. So where do I find it?
So you can find it. So you can find it on iTunes, on Spotify, on Facebook,
on our nice.
On our website too, forkmanandthechamp.com.
I thought our website had been hacked last week, Forkman. Did you get any news about that?
I have good news. We didn't get hacked at all.
Oh, the database is secure.
The database is secure. I'm the only one who have ever emailed our email from there doing a test. So I didn't receive an email saying my personal details had been sold to some company. So we're all good.
There we go. I just found your page then, and
Awesome.
Anyway, there we go. Nice beard. There we go. Bloody hell, it was long.
I'm also about to get a Instagram page.
What? Why have you never run any of this by me?
You have to cover it. You have to cover it all, guys. You can't stick to one platform these days. You've got to cover all bases.
Actually, talking about platforms, before we sign off, do you have any advice for anyone listening that actually wants to get into radio? What would your advice be?
See, I'll split it up. Okay, so if you want to get into announcing, make sure you know exactly which part. Now, what I mean by that is, if you want to just do sort of like music announcing, and the examples that I'll give would probably be like, Huggy, or Mike Hammond in Sydney at the moment. The shifts after the brekkie show and before the drive shift. So
yeah, so like Dave, like what Dave used to do, Dangerous Dave.
Oh, like Dangerous Dave, yeah, that's another good example. Look, that's now going to be really, really difficult to get into, and that's just purely because there's a hell of a lot more networking going on these days. And the biggest company in Australian radio is Southern Cross Stereo, and they've got 50 plus stations all around Australia, but there's more and more networking. So the good thing about Southern Cross Stereo is because they do have all those stations, they are always after brekkie shows. So if on air is your way, then that's probably the better option for you, is to go down that path. To get on air is, find somebody that you want to work with maybe, or start your own podcast, and then, sort of to display your personality, and then you can sort of on-sell that maybe to SEA or some of the other regional networks that are out there, because they will be looking for brekkie personalities. Excuse me. Behind the scenes, if you want to get into radio, one thing I can tell you is that radio are desperate for audio engineers. So the people who cut up all the promos and all that sort of stuff. Radio is desperate for those guys. Desperate for those guys. The other medium to get into for radio, and you will be highly valued and highly sought after, would be getting into, believe it or not, video editing. Radio stations now, they're desperate for somebody who can edit a video, who can make it look good, and have that certain flair to it. So if you can Photoshop, if you can video edit, and if you can do a tiny bit of audio editing along the side, radio stations will be clamoring for you. I guarantee it. So start scrubbing up on learning how to use any sort of video editing software. The majority of them are all using Adobe for pretty much everything. So Premiere Pro, start looking up some After Effects tutorials on YouTube, and start doing some Photoshop stuff as well. I guarantee you radio stations will be hanging to get you on board if you're a master of that sort of stuff, which is really weird because it's almost nothing to do with quote-unquote radio, but radio stations see their presence on social media as highly important, and if you can make that look good, they're going to want you.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute honor having you on, and I'm sure people have loved seeing you on and hearing you on.
No, man, it's been fun. It's don't do this very often, so thank you very much for having me. And as soon as Garfield and I are ready to launch, I'll drop you a line and let you know what it's all about, and all those other people that you still have that remember the old podcast, you can let them know that it's making a kind of return.
A kind of a semi-return, but without the
Yeah, it's not going to be exactly what you remember, but the spirit will still be there.
So this is the part we usually do a shout out to people. Someone we haven't seen in a while. Do you want to start, champ? Any?
Oh, shout out to, I guess, Graham. You know, our old mate Graham.
Old mate Graham, yeah.
Yes, haven't seen him in a while because I haven't been down at the van. But shout out to Graham if you're listening. Yeah, miss seeing you, buddy.
I'll make sure I pass it along to him. Brian?
Well, this is actually quite freaky that we were just speaking about who would play us in a movie, and I said Ben Stiller, and sadly, his father, Jerry Stiller, the reports are coming in that he literally has just passed away. So my shout out goes to Jerry Stiller, one of my favorite characters on Seinfeld.
Jeez, yeah. Did he also play Mr. Potato Head?
I can't remember. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just remember him as George's father on Seinfeld. But yeah, the reports are coming in that that Jerry has died, aged 92. So shout out George's dad, Frank Costanza, Jerry Stiller.
And I'll do a shout out. Who am I going to do a shout out to this week? I'll do a shout out to anyone alone at this time, because there are a lot of people who are alone, don't have any family. So shout out to all those people doing things alone.
Nice.
Until next time, I've been Forkman.
I've been the champ.
And you have been?
Be Bryan Madigan, Odie. Thanks for having us, guys.
Ciao.